Hello, welcome to part 3 of the Great Depression and the New Deal. This topic is on the crash. Now, we've already covered the Depression moving through the agricultural industry and the manufacturing industry, and then finally it is going to hit the financial industry. Now, by the late 1920s, the economy, the financial sector is in this bull market, right? Dividends keep going up and up. Stocks keep going up, and there's some economists that are going so far as to say this is never going to end. This is going to go on forever, right? Some would even say you're a fool if you're not investing in the stock market, right? One young entrepreneur by the name of Joseph Kennedy is actually going to make a lot of money during this time period in the stock market using tactics that today we would categorize as insider trading, which is kind of ironic because under the Franklin Roosevelt administration, he's actually going to be placed in head of the newly created SEC in order to clean up these practices in which he himself had been participating in. Right? Now, if you couldn't afford to buy stock, or if you wanted to buy more stock than you had the money for, you simply got a loan for them. Right? It was great because then you just put down 10%, you can get 10 times the stock for your dollar. And that's fantastic if the market's going up forever. Now, these aren't loans like what you normally think about. These are call loans, which means at the end of the day, they check the loan to see if you still have at least 10% equity into the loan. If the stock goes up, yes, of course you do. It's not a problem. As a matter of fact, you can very quickly double your money. The stock only needs to go up 10%, right? But if the stock goes down, it's very quick for you to lose your entire equity in it. And at the end of the day, if you don't have that 10% equity, they call the loan in. You've got to either reestablish that 10% equity or you lose the stock. You lose the collateral, which is the stock, right? So this is a very dangerous way of investing, but if the stock market's going up forever, who cares, right? And on top of this, there's no regulation, right? There's nothing regulating, the companies don't have to produce produce earnings reports. They, these stock companies can buy stock in each other. This was a tactic that was often used to inflate the stock prices. I'll buy 10,000 shares of your stock, you buy 10,000 shares of my stock, and our company's stocks both go up, right? There's no stop gaps if it goes into a free fall like today, and we've seen this in recent history here, where if the stock market drops a certain percentage points in a single day, it shuts down trading automatically, right? It's got a little stop sign, right, to make it stop. It sits there for 15 minutes on the first stop gap we have now, and then it allows trading to resume again, right? So there's none of that in existence. So if the stock goes into free fall, there's really nothing to keep that from getting out of control. Right now, stocks are becoming stupidly overpriced, overinflated. To give you some examples, from January to August of 1929, the year that the market is going to crash, Commonwealth Edison, Thomas Edison's power company, is going to go from $202 a share to $450 a share in just that 8-month period. That same time period, Western Utilities is going to go from $169 a share to $529 a share. And my personal favorite, a company called National Investors Corporation, is going to begin business in July of 1929, literally just a couple months before the crash, right? They offered their initial offering at $11.25 a share. By September, a month before the crash, they were $345 per share, stupidly overvalued. But in October of 1929, because of all this background instability, this growing depression in these other industries, and this ridiculous overinflated stock, the whole house of cards comes crashing down. By October, stocks are valued typically 4 times their actual worth, right? And so it's just a matter of time before things are going to start coming apart. Now, the U.S. stock market is not the first stock indices to begin to collapse. In September of 1929, September 20th, the London Stock Exchange is going to crash. Now, it had been the crash in London had been based mostly on a scandal that had broken out, so most people kind of laughed it off. Oh, London stock market crashed because of this scandal with some of its big players. It has nothing to do with any instability in the market, right? But then finally, on October 24th, 1929, the U.S. stock market starts to drop. And I mean, it starts to plummet. In 3 hours, $11 billion had disappeared. $11 billion of wealth had disappeared into the ether, right? The major players in the stock market tried to do anything to stem the tide. They actually pumped in $200 million of their own money, buying up stocks, mostly U.S. Steel actually, to try and show that, nope, this is fine. And what happened was the stock prices did stabilize. It worked for about 5 days. Finally, on Tuesday, October 29th, the U.S. stock market went into free fall. A major crash, right? Stocks suddenly became absolutely worthless. For example, at the beginning of that day, White Sewing Machine opened that day at $48 per share. Towards the end of trading that day, a messenger boy came in with a buy offer at $1 per share. From $48 a share to $1 per share, and this buy offer was actually a waste of money because by the next day, White Sewing Machine no longer existed as a company. They had gone completely bankrupt, right? The stock market's going to continue to plummet. I mean, we have that big crash of the day, and that's what we focus on, but it's going to go into a continual, slow decline across several years, right? At its peak, the Dow Jones industry was in August of 1929. It was measured at 380.33. By June of 1932, when it finally hits its low, that's when the crash finally truly ends. It was valued at only $42.84. Right? This is a major downturn. So, the stock market now has crashed. The financial sector is now affected. Now it's going to move into the banks. That's the next place, right? These banks had all those call loans out there. These call loans get called in because people have lost their equity in it. They end up getting that collateral. It's the stock. The stock is worthless, right? So now the banks become destabilized. Banks begin to fail, right? Give you a measure of this. On average in the United States, between 1921 and 1929, you had about 600 banks fail a year, all right? Which isn't really a terrifying number, right? In 1930, you had 1,350 banks fail. You start to see this increase. 1931, 2,293 banks fail, all right? 1932, despite the fact that Herbert Hoover, and we'll talk about these programs later, had instituted programs to try and stabilize the banking industry, you still had 1,453 banks fail. And then finally, in 1933, from January to March, that period of time between the beginning of the year and the inauguration of Franklin Roosevelt, in just that 3 months, over 4,000 U.S. banks failed in just, well, really 2 months and 4 days, right? The banks are absolutely in turmoil, and of course now we're in a full-on depression in every sector of every market, and of course that means we need to find someone to blame, and of course it's going to be Herbert Hoover.